The television courtroom went into absolute shock when Jennifer Walsh, a 49-year-old real estate investor being sued for rental fraud, walked into Judge Judy's courtroom with her boyfriend seated directly behind her in the gallery, radiating an aura of legal authority that immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. But this wasn't just any boyfriend providing moral support. Before Judge Judy even took the bench, Karen announced with the kind of smug superiority that could only come from years of successfully bullying people with legal threats. "Your Honor, I'd like you to know that my boyfriend Michael is a practicing attorney, and he's here to ensure this proceeding is conducted properly." The silence that followed was deafening as every person in that courtroom processed what had just happened. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed into the kind of death stare that had made corrupt lawyers flee the profession entirely. But what happened in the next 6 minutes when Judge Judy asked one simple question about Michael's bar status would destroy not just Karen's case, but both of their entire lives, ending their careers, their freedom, and exposing a pattern of legal fraud so extensive it would trigger FBI investigations across 4 states and change tenant protection laws nationwide. Before we show you the exact moment when Judge Judy asked the one question that demolished this couple's entire 7-year fraud operation, you need to understand something critical about this case. This wasn't just about one illegal eviction or one intimidation tactic. This was about 2 con artists who had spent 7 years systematically terrorizing vulnerable tenants by weaponizing fake legal credentials to extort over $127,000 from families who couldn't afford to fight back. And Judge Judy had spent 72 hours investigating every aspect of their operation, uncovering evidence so damning that state bar investigators were literally waiting in the courthouse to arrest Michael Brennan the moment Judge Judy exposed him on national television. Hit that subscribe button right now if you believe fake lawyers who intimidate innocent people deserve to be exposed and destroyed, and smash that like button because what Judge Judy does when she discovers this couple has been running a legal fraud operation will restore your faith that corruption always catches up with people who think they're untouchable. Trust me, the next 27 minutes will prove that you cannot fool a real judge with fake credentials, and watching 2 arrogant con artists realize their entire world is collapsing on national television never gets old. Jennifer Walsh was the kind of landlord who made honest property owners look bad by association. At 49 years old, she owned 8 rental properties across the city worth a combined $2.8 million, generating approximately $180,000 in annual rental income. But Jennifer, who insisted everyone call her by her middle name Karen because she thought it sounded more professional, had discovered something far more profitable than simply being a good landlord who maintained properties and treated tenants fairly. She had discovered that most tenants, especially working-class families living paycheck to paycheck, would rather pay money to make problems disappear than fight a landlord who appeared to have a real attorney backing her up. And that's where Michael Brennan entered the picture, transforming Karen's moderately successful rental business into a full-scale tenant intimidation operation that generated an additional $127,000 over 7 years through pure fraud and exploitation. Michael Brennan was 52 years old and had spent the last 11 years of his life living a lie so elaborate that even he sometimes seemed to believe it. He introduced himself as an attorney, handed out business cards that read Michael J. Brennan, Esquire, attorney at law, maintained a professional website advertising legal services, and rented a small office suite with his name on the door and impressive-looking law books on the shelves behind his desk. Everything about Michael Brennan screamed successful legal professional, from his expensive suits to his authoritative manner of speaking to the way he confidently cited case law and statutory codes. There was just one problem with Michael's carefully constructed legal persona. He wasn't actually a lawyer. He had never passed the bar exam despite taking it 4 times between 2009 and 2012. He had never been admitted to practice law in any state. He had no license, no legitimate credentials, and no legal authority whatsoever. What he did have was a law degree from a mediocre school, 11 years of experience intimidating people who didn't know how to verify attorney credentials, and a girlfriend who provided him with a steady stream of victims to target with his fake legal expertise. The partnership between Karen and Michael was a match made in fraudster heaven. They met at a real estate investment seminar in 2017, and within weeks they had recognized the perfect criminal synergy between her rental properties and his fake attorney credentials. The system they developed was devastatingly effective in its simplicity. Karen would rent her properties to working-class families, typically immigrants or single parents who had limited resources and even more limited understanding of tenant rights and legal procedures. She would collect first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposits that ranged from $2,000 to $4,000 depending on the property. For the first few months, everything would seem normal. But then Karen would begin finding violations. The grass was half an inch too long. There was a stain on the carpet that violated the cleanliness clause. The tenant had guests staying over more than 3 nights, which violated the occupancy restrictions. A package was left on the porch for 2 hours, which violated the aesthetic standards clause. These violations were always technically within the lease agreements Karen wrote, agreements that were deliberately filled with impossible-to-follow restrictions that gave her legal pretext for whatever she wanted to do. When tenants pushed back or questioned these absurd violations, that's when Michael would make his entrance with a legal threat letter on official-looking attorney letterhead. The letters Michael sent were masterpieces of legal intimidation designed specifically to terrify people who didn't know how the legal system actually worked. They cited obscure statutes and case law, threatened lawsuits for tens of thousands of dollars in damages, warned about damage to credit scores and rental histories, and made it crystal clear that Michael J. Brennan, Esquire, was prepared to take the tenant to court and destroy them financially if they didn't comply immediately with his client's demands. The letters always included his bar number, which added an air of legitimacy that made them nearly impossible for ordinary people to question. What the tenants didn't know, what they had no way of knowing, was that the bar number on Michael's letterhead actually belonged to a completely different attorney named Michael Brennan who practiced law in a different state and had no connection whatsoever to the fraud being perpetrated in his name. It was identity theft, it was fraud, and it was devastatingly effective because nobody thought to verify the credentials of an attorney who seemed so professional and authoritative. Over 7 years, Karen and Michael ran this scam on 12 different families. The pattern was always the same. Karen would find or manufacture a violation, Michael would send a threatening letter, and the terrified tenant would either pay a settlement ranging from $2,000 to $8,000 to make the problem go away, or they would move out and forfeit their security deposit while Karen kept their belongings and sold them at estate sales for additional profit. 11 of the 12 families paid up or left quietly, 2 intimidated by the fake lawyer and 2 poor to hire real legal representation to fight back. Karen collected $63,000 in fraudulent settlements, another $42,000 in security deposits she kept without justification, and an additional $22,000 from selling tenants' belongings without proper legal process. Michael charged $800 to $1,500 for each legal threat letter he wrote, generating his own income stream from the fraud while simultaneously building a client base of other landlords Karen referred to him for similar services. Together, they had perfected a system that exploited the exact people the legal system was supposed to protect, using fake legal credentials as a weapon against families who trusted that an attorney letterhead meant something real. David Martinez never imagined he would become victim number 12 in Karen and Michael's long-running fraud operation. But that's exactly what happened when a medical emergency gave Karen the opening she needed to execute her most brazen theft yet. David was 34 years old, a middle school teacher earning $48,000 a year, raising his 7-year-old daughter alone after his wife died in a car accident 3 years earlier. He had been a model tenant in one of Karen's properties for 3 years, never missing a rent payment, maintaining the property beautifully and causing absolutely no problems. His rent was set up on automatic payment from his checking account, and he had documentation of every single payment going back to the day he moved in. But in month 35 of his tenancy, David developed severe abdominal pain at work and was rushed to the hospital for an emergency appendectomy that required him to stay hospitalized for 4 days while his daughter stayed with her grandmother across town. Those 4 days in the hospital gave Karen the opportunity she had been waiting for. She drove by David's apartment and noticed that his car hadn't moved, the lights were off and there was mail piling up. Instead of calling him to check if everything was okay, instead of showing even basic human decency toward a tenant who had been perfect for 3 years, Karen saw an opportunity for profit. She filed an abandonment notice with the court claiming David had vacated the property without notice, changed the locks on his apartment, and within 48 hours had emptied his entire unit. When David was discharged from the hospital and returned home with his daughter, still recovering from surgery and in considerable pain, he discovered that his key no longer worked in the door. Standing on his own doorstep confused and increasingly panicked, he called Karen's property management number repeatedly until she finally answered with a tone of complete indifference. She informed him that he had abandoned the property, that his belongings had been removed and sold to recover damages and unpaid rent, and that his security deposit of $3,500 had been applied toward cleaning and repairs. David tried to explain that he had been in the hospital, that his rent was paid automatically and was completely current, that he had never abandoned anything. Karen's response was to hang up and immediately text Michael to prepare a legal threat letter because she knew David would try to fight back. Within 24 hours, David received a letter from Michael J. Brennan, Esquire, attorney at law, informing him that any attempt to pursue legal action against Karen Walsh would result in a countersuit for $25,000 in damages for breach of lease, property abandonment, and defamation of his client's business reputation. David was devastated. The belongings Karen had sold included his furniture, his television and electronics, his daughter's toys and books, items with sentimental value from his late wife, and everyday necessities that would cost thousands of dollars to replace. He had receipts proving the value of his belongings totaled at least $8,500. He was forced to pay $2,800 for 2 weeks in a hotel while he searched for a new apartment, another $1,200 in moving costs, and $2,000 to replace essential items like beds and kitchen supplies so he and his daughter had somewhere to sleep and something to eat off of. But worse than the financial devastation was watching his 7-year-old daughter cry herself to sleep asking where all her toys went and why the mean lady took everything. David consulted with a real attorney who immediately recognized that David had an excellent case for illegal eviction, theft of property, and bad faith retention of security deposit. But when the attorney saw Michael Brennan's letterhead and verified the bar number, something seemed wrong. The bar number was real, but it belonged to a different Michael Brennan who practiced in a completely different state and had never heard of Karen Walsh or this case. That discovery changed everything. David's attorney advised him to file his case with Judge Judy's show specifically because exposing Michael's fraud on national television would not only help David get justice but would protect countless other tenants from falling victim to this scam in the future. Judge Judy's producers were immediately interested because the case had everything they looked for: clear wrongdoing, sympathetic victim, arrogant villain, and a twist they had never seen before involving a fake attorney. When Judge Judy's research team began investigating, they uncovered the full scope of Karen and Michael's 7-year operation, and Judge Judy made a decision. She would let Karen bring her fake lawyer boyfriend to court, let them think his presence would intimidate everyone, and then she would destroy them both on national television with one simple question that every real attorney can answer instantly but every fake attorney dreads. The Judge Judy courtroom buzzed with its usual electric energy as cameras rolled and the audience settled into their seats expecting another landlord-tenant dispute. David Martinez entered first, wearing his best suit that was slightly too large for his thin frame, carrying a folder thick with documentation and photographs. He looked nervous, intimidated, and exhausted from months of fighting a system that seemed designed to crush people like him. Then Karen Walsh made her entrance and everything about her screamed money, power, and absolute confidence that she would win. Her designer business suit probably cost more than David made in a month. Her jewelry caught the studio lights with every movement. Her leather briefcase was the kind executives carried into boardroom negotiations. But the most striking thing about Karen's entrance was the man who followed her into the courtroom and took a prominent seat in the gallery directly behind her. Michael Brennan looked every inch the successful attorney. His charcoal gray suit was perfectly tailored, his tie was silk, his leather portfolio was embossed with his initials, and his entire demeanor radiated the kind of quiet authority that comes from years of courtroom experience. He carried a legal pad and an expensive pen, and as he sat down he made eye contact with David Martinez in a way that was clearly meant to intimidate, a look that said you're outmatched and you should give up now. Before Judge Judy even entered, Karen turned to address the court in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your Honor, I'd like you to know that my boyfriend Michael is a practicing attorney, and he's here to ensure this proceeding is conducted properly." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Karen smiled with the confidence of someone who had used this exact tactic successfully for 7 years. She pulled out one of Michael's business cards and approached the bench, placing it in front of where Judge Judy would sit. The card was professionally printed on heavy stock: Michael J. Brennan, Esquire, attorney at law, with a phone number, email address, and office address. The gallery murmured with a mixture of impressions. Some audience members looked impressed that Karen had brought legal representation. Others looked skeptical that something about this situation didn't feel right. David Martinez's face fell as he realized he was facing not just an unethical landlord but apparently a trained legal professional who knew exactly how to exploit every loophole in the system. Judge Judy entered moments later with her characteristic no-nonsense bearing, and her eyes immediately went to the business card on her bench. She picked it up, examined it with an expression that gave away nothing, and placed it carefully in her folder. She reviewed the case file and then opened the proceedings with surgical precision. "Mr. Martinez, you're suing Ms. Walsh for $18,000 stemming from an illegal eviction. Ms. Walsh, you claim the eviction was legal because Mr. Martinez abandoned the property. Let's begin with you, Mr. Martinez. Tell me what happened." David's testimony was quiet, dignified, and heartbreaking. He explained the emergency appendectomy, showed his hospital records with dates and times, demonstrated that his rent had been paid automatically and was completely current, and presented receipts for the belongings Karen had sold. When he described his daughter asking where her toys were, his voice cracked with emotion that was impossible to fake. Karen's response was a masterclass in legal jargon clearly coached by someone who wanted to sound authoritative. Your Honor, the plaintiff violated Section 12.3 of the Residential Tenancy Agreement, which clearly states that absence from the property for more than 72 hours without notification constitutes abandonment. As my attorney boyfriend has advised me, abandonment is clearly established under State Statute 42-103, and I followed proper legal procedures for abandoned property as outlined by legal counsel. She kept glancing back at Michael, who nodded approvingly and wrote notes on his legal pad like he was documenting everything for a future appeal. Karen continued with more confident citations of lease clauses and legal procedures, repeatedly emphasizing that she had been advised by her attorney, that she had followed counsel's recommendations, that everything she did was under the guidance of legal expertise. Judge Judy listened with increasing interest, her eyes moving between Karen's confident performance and Michael's authoritative presence in the gallery. She asked Karen detailed questions about the timeline, the notification procedures, the disposition of David's belongings. Karen answered each question with the kind of specificity that suggested she had been very carefully prepared. She mentioned consulting with her attorney boyfriend multiple times, making it clear that Michael's legal knowledge was the foundation of her entire defense. The audience could sense something building, that particular tension that comes before Judge Judy demolishes someone's carefully constructed lies. Finally, Judge Judy shifted her attention away from Karen and looked directly at Michael Brennan sitting in the gallery. Ms. Walsh, you keep referring to your attorney boyfriend. Mr. Brennan, is it? Michael sat up straighter, nodded confidently, and replied in a voice that carried authority. Yes, Your Honor. Michael J. Brennan. Judge Judy continued with seemingly casual questions. And you're here in what capacity, Mr. Brennan? Michael smiled professionally. Moral support for my girlfriend, Your Honor. Though as an attorney, I'm always available if needed. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair with that slight smile that regular viewers recognized as the calm before a devastating storm. I see. And you've been advising Ms. Walsh on landlord-tenant law? Michael nodded. Yes, Your Honor. It's one of my specialties. I've been helping Karen understand the legal complexities of property management for several years now. Karen interjected eagerly, thinking she was helping her case. Your Honor, if you have questions about the legal procedures I followed, Michael can explain the statutes and precedents. He's very knowledgeable about these matters. Judge Judy's response was ice cold. I'm quite capable of understanding legal procedures, Ms. Walsh. I practiced law for 25 years before you were probably even born. The courtroom went silent as Judge Judy reached for her folder and pulled out several documents, including Michael's business card. She studied them for a moment with an expression of someone who already knew exactly what they would find but wanted to give the defendant every opportunity to come clean before the hammer fell. Mr. Brennan, before we continue, I have a quick administrative question. Judge Judy's voice was deceptively casual, almost friendly, and Michael sat up even straighter with the confidence of someone who had successfully fooled people with his credentials for 11 years. Of course, Your Honor. Whatever you need. The entire courtroom leaned forward slightly, sensing that something significant was about to happen but not quite understanding what. Judge Judy looked directly at Michael with the kind of focused intensity that had made seasoned attorneys nervous for decades, and then she asked the question that would destroy both of their lives in a single moment. What state bar are you admitted to practice in, Mr. Brennan? The silence that followed was absolutely nuclear. Every sound in the courtroom seemed to stop existing. Michael's confident expression froze on his face like a computer that had just crashed. Karen's smile disappeared so fast it was as if someone had physically erased it. David Martinez looked confused but hopeful, sensing something important had just happened but not understanding what. The audience held its collective breath. Michael's mouth opened but no words came out. He looked at Karen, then back at Judge Judy, then down at his legal pad as if the answer might be written there. Judge Judy waited with the patience of a predator who knew the prey was already caught. Mr. Brennan? It's a simple question. What state bar are you admitted to practice in? Michael finally stammered out words that sealed his fate. I'm licensed in. I practice in. His voice trailed off as he realized there was no good answer, no way out of the trap Judge Judy had just sprung with surgical precision. Judge Judy's voice cut through his stammering like a blade through silk. It's a very simple question, counselor. Every attorney in America can answer this question in 2 seconds. What state bar admitted you to practice law? Michael tried deflection, his voice taking on an edge of desperation. Your Honor, I don't think my credentials are relevant to Ms. Walsh's case. This is about her property rights, not about my background. Judge Judy leaned forward with an expression that made Michael physically shrink in his seat. Answer the question, Mr. Brennan. What state bar are you admitted to? The silence stretched for another 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. Finally, Michael said quietly, almost in a whisper, I attended law school. I have extensive legal knowledge and training. Judge Judy's response was immediate and devastating. That's not what I asked you. Are you licensed to practice law? Yes or no? Michael looked at the floor. No. But I have legal training and I've helped many people understand their rights. The courtroom erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. Karen jumped up from her chair, her face red with panic or anger or some combination of both. Your Honor, this is completely irrelevant. Michael has legal knowledge and training. He went to law school. He understands the law better than most licensed attorneys. This is just a technicality that has nothing to do with whether I followed proper procedures. Judge Judy's voice rose to a level that made the walls seem to vibrate. Sit down, Ms. Walsh. This is extremely relevant and you know it. She turned back to Michael with fury barely contained behind judicial composure. Mr. Brennan, you've been representing yourself as an attorney for how long? Michael refused to answer. You sent legal threat letters on behalf of Ms. Walsh, correct? Michael mumbled something inaudible. You advertise legal services on a professional website, correct? You have business cards that say attorney at law, correct? You use the title Esquire, which is a protected title reserved for licensed attorneys, correct? Each question was another nail in Michael's coffin, and he had no answers that wouldn't incriminate him further. Judge Judy opened her folder and began presenting evidence with the methodical precision of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. Mr. Brennan, you attended Coastal Law School from 2006 to 2009. You took the bar exam in July 2009 and failed. You took it again in February 2010 and failed. You took it again in July 2011 and failed. You took it a fourth time in February 2012 and failed. You never passed the bar exam in any jurisdiction. You have never been licensed to practice law anywhere. Yet for the past 11 years, you have been holding yourself out as an attorney, sending legal threat letters on attorney letterhead, charging fees for legal services, and using a bar number that belongs to a completely different attorney in a different state. That's not just unauthorized practice of law, Mr. Brennan. That's fraud. That's identity theft. That's wire fraud because you sent those letters through the mail and email. Those are federal crimes. Karen was openly crying now, her carefully constructed defense crumbling in real time. Judge Judy turned to her with equal fury. Ms. Walsh, did you know Mr. Brennan was never licensed to practice law? Karen tried to speak but couldn't form coherent words. Judge Judy answered her own question by pulling out printed emails.